Hello and welcome. It's good to be back. My last video was about the Blackmagic 6K Pro, describing the bare camera. Today, I'm looking at the camera again, but this time I'm looking at rigging it out, adding stuff to it. Today I'm shooting, as usual, on the Canon C100. I'll just show that to you. And record. So there it is in all its glory. And I'm also using a Sony FX30, which is focused on the table. And for sound, I'm using up here the Rode NTG3, which is plugged straight into the Canon C100. That's one of the reasons why the Canon is so useful, so easy to use. The Canon is running on mains power. The Sony is running on its battery. I'm also using, by the way, just get this back on. I'm using a small monitor here. This is an absolutely ancient Ninja blade, very old indeed, and it is also running on mains power. Now let's get to this camera. Now you can use this camera bare if you want to. Perfectly usable. You put a CFast card in it, and away you go. Take a couple of spare batteries with you, of course, because the battery will only last about 50 minutes. But if you're just collecting video, you're more than likely making shots lasting no more than half a minute or so. So there's plenty of opportunity to replace batteries if they go flat. So that's not a problem. But you may want to add things to the camera. Sound, for instance, audio, microphones, monitors. If you're going to do that, you're going to need a cage. Now the cage which I've chosen to use, which I've got on the camera here, is the Smallrig cage, and that was the most economical at the time when I was looking for a cage. There was also a Tilta, which is probably better designed, but it is considerably more expensive, or at least it was. Now, let's take a look around the cage, because the reason we're using the cage is so we can attach things to the camera, and the cage has a large number of attachment points. On this side, we have 1, 2, 3 3/4 20s and one ARRI 3/8. Now, a word about the ARRI 3/8. You can see, just turn that around so you can see it again. You can see beside the 3/8 there are two little holes. These are for locator pins on the ARRI compatible peripheral that is attached. You only have to do up one screw, and because of the locator pins and holes, whatever you're attaching cannot rotate. So it makes it quick and easy. The alternative would require 2 screws. So, moving to the top, and on top we can see that there are 3/4 20s over here, and then here there are no less than 6/4 20s and one ARRI 3/8. This is where you would attach an ARRI compatible handle. Over here we have a cold shoe, which you normally use for attaching a microphone. And around this side we have a number of 1/4 20s down here. Let's count them. There are 4 on that side, and on the other side over here there are 3/4 20s and one ARRI 3/8. Now this part here is also a NATO REL. The NATO rail allows NATO-compatible peripherals to be attached quickly and easily. This, for instance, is a NATO-compatible handle, and it has a NATO clamp which will fit quickly and easily onto a NATO rail. Now, the reason it's called a NATO rail is because, believe it or not, NATO stands for North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Yes, it is that, NATO. And they originally used this rail and clamp system for attaching accessories to armaments, like, for instance, attaching a scope to a rifle. NATO don't use that system anymore. They have some other system. But the NATO system has become pretty much universal in video equipment. Now, underneath, and I've put a plate on here, because if you don't put a plate on it, the camera will fall over and land on the lens. Boom. So that's the reason I've got that plate on there. Now, underneath, I'll just take this plate off and have a quick look. Underneath, we have, again, a number of holes. Let's get a good look at them. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9, I think, 1/4-20s, and 2 3/8. Now, the 3/8 are not of the ARRI compatible type, they're just 3/8 threaded holes. Now, 2 of the 1/4-20s are marked here for, what does it say? Tiny, tiny writing. It says, glasses off, it says for DJI RS2, RSC2. So those 2 holes are the correct distance apart for attaching the DJI quick release plate for your gimbal. And as I said before, I think if you're putting this thing on a gimbal, well, good luck, because it is seriously heavy. Now let's get this back on so that it, as I say, so it doesn't fall over. There has to be a better way of doing this. I'm sure there is, but perhaps it's getting someone else to help you. Yeah, that'll do. More or less okay. Now it'll stand up. Good. Now, the first thing that you're probably going to want to attach is a handle. I'm going to turn this camera off. And you could use an ARRI compatible handle and attach it here, as I mentioned before. But what I have done is I've attached a little NATO rail. This is a little short one, which has 2 screws, and we just attach it to the cage using an appropriate Allen key. And now we can quite quickly attach this handle to the camera. And what we do is simply slide it on. Now, there are 2 end stops there, as you can see. That stops it from coming off. And here we just do up this clamp. And now we have our handle. Easy peasy. Now, of course, before we attach the handle, there's something else that we probably want to attach if we're not using a CFast card. And that is the Samsung T5. This is a 1 terabyte SSD. It is a very economical alternative to using a CFast card. This cage by Smallrig has a slot in the bottom of it for specifically this SSD. It just slots in there. This is a very elegant solution. Now, of course, it needs something to hold it in place there, otherwise it'll just fall out again. And we have, I should have thought of this before I put this back on. I'll take this off again. We have here, magnetically attached, a little Allen key or hex key. Now this is designed to operate this screw here, which will clamp down on the SSD, hold it in place like so. I haven't done that up very tightly, but tight enough. It's not going to move. Now, yeah, let's put this back. Someone is probably going to tell me there's an easy way of doing this with one hand. I'll wait. All right, now we're back. Now, of course, we have to attach a cable to this. This is one of the disadvantages of using your T5 SSD, that you're going to need an external cable. Now, you've got to be careful what cable you use, because not every cable is capable of carrying the data rate required for 6K video. This is a Condor blue cable, as you can tell. All Condor blue cables are blue. And it has a right angle connector on this end and a straight one on that end. Now, I use it like this. I put the right angle connector in here, where it's sort of flush with the camera, and then I put this into the USB port on the camera, like so. And that's pretty good down here. Normally I'd push that SSD a bit further in so that this is more flush with the body of the camera. This is a bit vulnerable, though, to being knocked. So what we have is this. This is the Smallrig cable clamp, and it has 2 clamps on it. One for the USB and one for HDMI. It goes on somewhat like that, and it occupies 2 of the 1/4-20 holes on this side of the cage. All right, it's a bit hard to do this and make it visible at the same time. But once this is done up, that is very securely held. These 2 clamps operate in an ingenious fashion. There is a wedge in here, 2 wedges, one for each cable, And as you screw down this thumb screw, it pushes down on the wedge and pushes it across so it clamps firmly on the cable. Good. So now we've got a handle and we've got an SSD. And what else do we need? Well, the next thing which you would probably think of is audio. The shotgun microphone picks up every sound. I normally use a dynamic microphone, but the dynamic microphone has to be very close to the mouth. It doesn't pick up any of the room sounds, so it's nice to use in an untreated sound room, or a sound untreated room. This is the Rode Video Mic Pro. It's very popular and a relatively inexpensive unit. We just slot it onto the cold shoe here. And do up the clamping screw so it holds it in place. And then pop the plug into the appropriate location. And that is now ready to rock and roll. If you turn it on, of course. This is handy because it actually comes with its own shock mount, as you can see. And that isolates the microphone from jolts and knocks on the camera body so that those aren't transmitted to your sound. Right, so now we've got quite a nice little rig. Got our handle, got our sound, got our SSD. Now, this handle, of course, can be placed on the side if we want. So I mentioned before, this is a NATO rail here. And we can take the top handle off, slide it across, and we need to rotate it. Just undo that and rotate thus. Change it to the vertical position. This will then slide onto this NATO rail here. Now it won't go off the top, but it won't go off the bottom. But it does clamp it in place there, like so. And now you've got a side handle. So the same handle you can use as a side handle or a top handle. And because we're using the NATO clamp, it's quite easy and quick to take it off and move it from one location to the other. That's the beauty of the NATO rail system. It's probably quicker to do it than it is to move an ARRI screwed on peripheral, if I can use that term. Okay. So what next? What else would we like to attach to our camera? We can put a strap on, of course, and I've got these Peak Design connectors here so that I can quickly put a strap on, hang this around my neck, and that gives me the opportunity to push the camera against the strap and makes it more steady for hand holding. I've got another way of doing that, which I'll explain somewhat later, perhaps in a different video. So, the next thing we might think of putting on here could be a follow focus, or it could be a battery. Now, I'm going to go for the follow focus at this point, because it's the easiest one to do. Now, I have a Smallrig mini follow focus. This requires only one rail. So you don't actually have to have a pair of rails, or the camera mounted on a pair of rails for this follow focus, because it'll go on with its own single rail And where can you see that? Yeah, that's it. And this. Now, this is, curiously, a NATO rail, which I'm going to screw onto a NATO rail. That doesn't make a lot of sense, does it? But that's how we get this rod clamp in place on the camera. So bear with me for a moment, and we will screw this NATO rail onto the camera here. Now, if we can just see that. Let's get the appropriate tool. And let's see if we can do this and make it visible. Okay, there's one screw. Now, these two screws are captive, so they need to be... I'm going to do this off screen, more or less. Right. Because they're captive screws, they've got to be screwed in a little bit at a time each, otherwise they sort of lock up. There we go. Now, I haven't done that up super tight, but it's tight enough. Now, this NATO rail has screwed onto the other NATO rail on the cage, but it still provides a NATO rail if you want to use it. So it's a little bit meta, isn't it? All right, now we undo this clamp, and we can put this rail in here, clamp it up, thus. And now we can put the follow focus on this rail. There's probably a number of ways of doing this. We just get it so that it's engaging there, tighten it up, and now we have a follow focus attached. You'll notice that on this lens, this is actually not a cinema lens, it's just a Zeiss Contax lens, Contax Zeiss 28mm f2.8, which a lot of people like using on this and other cameras because it's a vintage lens and it has certain characteristics that give you more of a sort of an analog effect rather than the pure digital sharpness that you get with modern lenses. Now, because it's just an ordinary lens, it doesn't have a, what do you call these things? Tracks? Gears? Doesn't have gears on it. But you can buy the gears. Smallrig make these gears in various sizes, so you can get one that just fits snugly on the lens. This one fits very nicely on this lens. I've got one for other lenses as well. Some of them, they don't quite fit quite as snugly as you would like, but it's a lot neater a solution than the strap and kind of buckle system that some of these gear solutions have. All right, so there is a follow focus. Now, this can be located differently. This can be put the other way up so that the rod is up here instead of down there. I'll just leave it like that for the moment. I've done another video specifically about this particular follow focus, which you can find linked in the description. Now, the next thing, as I mentioned, is a battery. When we put a battery on, we're going to need to put a pair of rails on the camera. I'm going to take this off, this follow focus off now, and we'll revisit the follow focus after we've got rails installed. So bear with me while I take this off again. Let me put that off to the side. Now, we want to put rails on. We're going to need a special plate to put underneath the camera. This is a Smallrig plate. It's not actually designed for this particular camera. I think it's designed for some other one, but it still does the job. Now, there's a thing about rails in that there's a standard distance between the rails and the center of the lens on the camera. And rail systems are all designed with that specific distance in mind. That means that once you set your rails up, you can then attach other things to the rails which are going to be in the right position for the camera lens. Right, let's get this thing off. Again. And we want to put that on instead. Now, I'm going to take the microphone off while we do this. Ooh, noise. We turn this upside down. And I'm going to use some of the holes on the base of this cage to attach this unit. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do. You would think that there were, there could be easier ways, quicker ways of attaching stuff like this. Well, here we are. This is what we got. So 2 screws, because we don't want this to be rotating. And I do those up moderately tightly. This is a Smallrig tool, and it's sort of become a bit sloppy. Moves around too much. Well, it's good to start with. Right, now there we have this plate. That will now stand up on its own again. No. And now we need 2 rails. Move that aside for the moment. Here is a pair of rails, and they are attached to this battery. This is a newer battery. Just turn it around so you can see. That's a newer battery. And it is attached to a Smallrig plate. You can take it off, and I'll just show you why it's called a V-mount battery, because of this V-shaped mounting thingy that engages with the V here on this plate. Now this plate is, what do you call it, an intelligent plate? I don't know. Is it intelligent? But you can get plates which are completely dumb, which just hold the battery and have got no electronics in them. But this plate engages with the battery. It connects to the battery's terminals here, and it has a USB, an 8-volt and 2 12-volt outlets on that side. And on this side, it has the universal D-type outlet. D-type is widely used for battery connections and power connections. This at the bottom, if you can see it, this is simply a rod connector. It connects the rods together at a standard distance. And because it's a standard distance, those rods will now slide into the holes on that plate under the camera, like so. I push them in as far as we want to go. Maybe something around there. And then we can tighten up these clamps underneath. And there we have the rods in place. So now we have standard 15mm rods. These are actually carbon fiber rods, these Smallrig rods, so they're a little bit lighter than aluminium. Now let's connect the battery up. We turn this around, you can see it. And we just drop the battery in place here. Now that didn't go on. You have to be careful. Make sure that it clicks solidly into place. Thus, we have an on-off switch here, which will connect the battery to the plate. Now we have a little light which indicates that it's on. Now we've got to connect the battery to the camera. To do that, we have a short D-type cable. This is a proprietary one specifically for the 6K Pro. Move this back a bit, then my face will be beautifully in focus again. This is the awful power connector that Blackmagic had decided to put on their cameras. It's a ghastly thing. The Canon C100 has a simple barrel connector that you just plug in and you're done. This thing, yeah. Did I say I didn't like it? Right, well, somewhere in there it has to be pushed into place, and you have to orient it the right way around. So, because there are two pins that need to be engaged. I'm not sure that I can get this in here without taking that cable clamp off. This is why I detest it. Now I've got it, I think. Is that it? That's it. That's why I detest it. If it was a barrel connector, you just push it in. Job done. But this has to be oriented exactly right. Otherwise, you push it in, you get it wrong, you can possibly bend two pins. And the pins are on the camera body, not in the plug. So you bend them, you're going to be a bother. All right. This plugs on here. Nice, big, simple connector. Can't go wrong with it. Can only go in one way. And now the camera is connected to power. This battery it's 3/4 charged. It's been some considerable time since I charged it. The battery holds its charge really well. So there we have our battery, and this battery will run this camera all day pretty much. And you can put a monitor on the cage or on the handle, and then you can power that monitor off off one of the connectors on this, like 12 volt or 8 volt or USB, whichever your monitor requires. So there. Now, If we wanted to attach the NTG3 microphone, the one that's up here, instead of this one, then what we would do is we'd get, I'll just put this to one side for the moment. We get a mount like this. This is a shock mount. You can pay $100 or more for a shock mount. This is from, hasn't got a label on it, but I'm pretty sure it's from Smallrig, and it costs about 15 bucks. It's a simple device. It's just got these rubber bands, and you push the microphone into the middle of those rubber bands, and then the microphone is then isolated. It's on a shock mount. It's adjustable for angle, like so, and it attaches to either, you can attach it to the cold shoe on the camera the same way as the Video Mic Pro, or it's got a 3/8 hole in it there, so you can attach it to something else. Like, for instance, you can attach it to a boom if you really want to, or you can attach it otherwise to a cage if you haven't got the cold shoe. This is the cable that you're going to need to attach the NTG3. The NTG3, like all professional microphones, has an XLR connector. So this is a standard XLR, and it goes to a mini XLR, which is what you need to plug into the Blackmagic. The Blackmagic on this side. Where is it? There. Yep. So Blackmagic has two mini XLR ports, and we can plug this in there. Thus, it's much easier to do this on the Canon C100, I tell you. All these things, you know, the cage actually makes all these ports less accessible because they're deeper inside the cage. Then this end just goes onto the microphone, like this. Okay, that's about, oh, it's not everything. I said I'd come back to the, I don't know if I can get that out again. Can't reach it. We'll leave it there for now. I said I'd come back to the follow focus, and we can actually take this follow focus that we had before, and we can pop it on this one of these rails, like so. That's not exactly going to work that way around, is it? Let's try it this way around. And engage it with the gears there, and tighten it up. Now you'll see that its position is now a lot more like the traditional position of a follow focus. It's off to the side there, and you can possibly handhold this camera and operate the follow focus at the same time. I wouldn't recommend it. Because holding this camera with one hand is, you know. You can use other varieties of follow focus, of course. There are others that are designed to go on both rails, not the mini follow focus like this one. I'll just show you one. Oh, so much noise. This is a more traditional follow focus, and as you can see, it's got the rod clamps there. You have a single screw here, which both clamps the rods and positions the follow focus horizontally. So that could be attached to those two rods. I say it's simple enough, and it may be and it may not be, but let's take that off. And let's take a look at attaching these. Yeah, we better undo that. Just talking on yourselves for a moment. So we've got that on, but we can see, I think we can see that the gear wheel is not going to engage on that. And fortunately, we can take the gear wheel off and we can put it on the other side. That one. And we put this now on the other side. Well, there have been occasions where I've taken this off and put it on the same side. It's been frustrating exercise. Now, speaking of frustrating exercises, let's try and get this back on again. I found that the best way to do this is to actually slacken off one of these rails and push it back out of the way. Noise. And we get this onto one rail and then push the other rail into place. And this tends to work a lot better than trying to get it onto both rails at the same time. So we clamp that rail up and get this in position. And we need to push that across until it engages there. Once it's engaged, we can do up this screw underneath, thus, and now we have that follow focus in place and working. Now, there are obviously lots of other things you can attach to the cage, depending on what kind of audio you're using. If you've got the wireless lavalier, for instance, or wireless microphones, you may want to attach the wireless receiver to the cage. Simple enough. You frequently can attach it simply to the cold shoe or one of those multiplicity of threaded holes. Oh, by the way, you may notice that I'm not using my usual set. Preparing to move house, and everything's been packed away. So I'm using a fairly minimal setup at the moment, and I'm going to have to, even what I've got at the moment, 2 lights, 2 background stands behind me, and a background roll, 2 tripods, another light stand there for the microphone. All of this stuff has got to be packed away for the weekend, which I'm really looking forward to. Not. So, until next time, till my next video, may your God go with you, and you look after yourselves.